Welcome to Latinos Who Thrive, the podcast that celebrates the resilience, creativity, and successes of the Latino community. I'm your host, Victor Escalante, and each week we bring you inspiring stories from Latinos who are breaking barriers and achieving greatness, and making the difference in their communities. From entrepreneurs and artists to leaders and innovators, our guests share their journeys, challenges, and triumphs, offering valuable insight and motivation for all. Join us as we explore the diverse paths to success and learn how you too can thrive. Let's get started and celebrate the power and potential of our vibrant Latino culture. What a show we have for you today. Joining us today is Dr. Salvador Bueno, who went from working as a roofer to earning his doctorate. Dr. Bueno holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Higher Education Administration, a Master's degree in Business Administration, and a Bachelor's degree in Business Management from the University of Phoenix. He is the founder of Collabucate, LLC, which is a research-based and data-driven consulting firm that collaborates with clients in educational environments, organizations, and the community in need of program management, operational design, strategic insight, and professional development. As a Latino-owned business, Collabucate, LLC has an organizational obligation to advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and belonging. So let's get started. And now we have Dr. Sal Bueno, PhD. Dr. Bueno, welcome to Latinos Who Thrive.
Victor, thanks for the invite. Looking forward to having this conversation.
As I mentioned to you before we went on the air, you got on my radar by seeing that picture on LinkedIn of you with your graduation gear, your stole on top of that roof, as though showing that you come from a background of taking roofs off or putting them on. So that's a powerful statement. And again, we communicate in America primarily through visual messaging. So kudos to your message. I'm sure that you got a lot of eyebrows looking up and praise for that picture.
Yeah, there was some feedback. People reached out, had some conversation, individual like yourself and the organization. And yeah, I think the more and more I process my experience in higher education, it's those roots that really hold strong. And so, I was giving a presentation over at UC Santa Cruz the week before, and my sister sent me a text, and she sent me the picture. And I thought, wow, that's crazy, considering how we were raised and where I come from. And so I wanted to add the end, 2024, right? We made it to the rooftop, and, whether that's academic excellence or just completion, and so, yeah, it brought me to tears, and it brought me to todos los recuerdos of growing up, of being on their roofs and, the manual labor. But ultimately, it's a focal point for those individuals, specifically my children, so that they can understand that, there's another level to this.
Por supuesto. So you have a PhD in higher education, but let's don't get ahead of ourselves. Dr. Bueno, tell us about your roots. Tell us where you're originally from.
So I was born in Fresno to my parents who were in the military. My father was 82nd Airborne. He was stationed in North Carolina. And my mother came to Fresno to visit her family. She was pregnant during the Thanksgiving holiday. She had me, and eventually we moved back to Oakland, California. And so I was raised there in East Oakland for 20 plus years, 24 years or so.
What was it like growing up for you as a Latino in a predominantly Latino state that is a melting pot for immigrants? So what was it like for you?
So specifically in Oakland, I had one of the highest homicide rates during the years that I was living there. And so navigating those spaces, trying to avoid gang violence, drugs, etc. It was a blue collar process, right? It was a blue collar process of navigating those spaces, hardworking. I was raised by my abuelita, Mary. She worked for the city of Oakland, and you know, you could say we're middle class, if you will. Unfortunately, our surrounding areas were highly infested with activity, right? Activity that can provide a fork in the road, if you will, for both positive or negative interactions.
I'm halfway through the Netflix series Last Chance U, which is yeah, which is staged right there in your area, and showing the gentrification, the disparity of the lower class families, how they really don't have a chance because the odds are stacked against them. And even a lot of these kids that great coach, great story, but let's be honest, probably less than 10% of those kids that have a winning season playing football in college will never amount to anything beyond that those glory days, because again, the system is stacked against us, the minorities, against us that don't have the pedigree. So talk to us about that, Dr. Bueno, and some of the struggles that you went through in being a minority, being a Hispanic, having a lower middle class upbringing, and what was it like for you? What is the through line for you to get to earning a PhD?
Um, that's a great point. Yes, I think it's what 1%, 2%, if that. 5% of high school players may make it in sports to a college. 1 to 2% will make it further on. Um, Growing up, I had the opportunity to play competitive soccer. Unfortunately, my grades did not allow me to play high school for many reasons, factors of my own. In high school, I had a 0.0 GPA, grade point average. I was kicked out of 2 high schools. I graduated from continuation school. And so
Was that because you didn't apply yourself, or was that because you struggled intellectually?
both ended. I made it to community college, and during the testing at the time, in that time, we tested entrance exams, and I had a 7th grade reading level.
Wow.
And so I joke with my kids and say, "Wow, I had to take the remedial courses for the remedial courses, right?"
Sure.
And so to go back to the soccer component, there was many individuals who, I had the opportunity to play on teams where that took me outside of my environment. And so I seen that there were other individuals who were making it, specifically not people who looked like me, but I was invited into other spaces. And so within these
Because of sports. Because of sports. Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
sports, right? Because as soon as I got home, we were I would have been a 3rd generation construction worker, right? A 3rd generation
Yeah.
roofer, because
Right.
that's what we did. Um, so the pathway to that, unfortunately led me to the, what do we call it now, alternative pathway. At the time was,
In Texas, we call it charter schools. And I work with a charter school here locally in Houston. And the previous graduating class, I was brought in to do some coaching. And I was just flabbergasted at the attitude of these kids. It's like they're little punks that have no concept of respect. They have no concept of grit. They have no concept of dreaming beyond just being hoodlums in the hood. It's like I have no idea how they plan to live their life other than maybe working at a fast food restaurant. But again, that's a systemic rottenness that exists in our society. That children's minds are being wasted. Now, I want to get back to you. At what point did you get serious about your education? And at what point did you decide that you wanted to earn a PhD? Because in America, we only have about 10% of all Latinos who have earned a PhD. So that's quite an accomplishment. And in my book, you're the superstar. You're the rock star, not the entertainment rock stars, because they don't do crap for the young generations that are up and coming. But it's like you being at the forefront, being a leader, being an example, and then working in the system so that kids can identify with someone of their own to aspire to be someone like you. Talk about that.
I wish I could say it was instant. The picture that you seen that caused you to connect with me. I remember that day. I remember, the individuals that were there, my father and my father's copa. And I remember the words that they told me. I was out of high school, graduated from continuation school, and I just didn't know what was next. So I went to work, right? And I remember they telling me that if I don't take my tail to school, this is the life that I'm going to live. And I'll pause here to say that it's not about life, right? Blue collar work is amazing. I mean, it got me through the pandemic for some time. However, the challenges that we face outside of not having these degrees, are very impactful. And so I joined a local community college, Chabot College in Hayward. I only went there because I seen a flyer around campus. I went to enroll to summer courses, and soccer was starting up. I seen a flyer, I seen a phone number, I called the coach, and I went out to practice. And from there, tryouts, and from there they built a schedule, if you will. My coach helped me, Tony Eatway, helped me get this schedule together. So mind you, going from a full-time job, right, steady income, to attending a college where you have to be full-time if you want to play sports. Right? How was I going to manage the financial structure? And so it was tough. And, I didn't see anybody who looked like me, although Puente program originated in Chabot College in the early years. I had no clue of that, because all I did was went to practice and went to my classes and went back to my coach. I went to the gym. And so I didn't see anything of or know of anybody who had PhD, and I wasn't striving for that, honestly. Unfortunately,
were your parents supportive of your education, or did they leave things up to you?
Yeah, we were left up to me. Things were left up to me back in high school, and I think, with all due respect to my parents, I think they gave up. They didn't know what to do. Right? Those individuals that you talked about, they're the punks, if you will, the guys who were up to no good. I wasn't a gang member. Fortunately, I avoided some of that, but just like my post stated, roofer to professor, degenerate to doctorate. I wasn't degenerate. I didn't follow the rules. I tried to make up my own rules. Thank God that, I didn't end up in prison or dead, right? But I think education, enrolling into community college, having these conversations, then I started to hear people who wanted to get out, people who wanted to go to the next level.
Now, you fit the typical stereotype of a Latino, low aspirations, right? Low aspirations, just live by the seat of your pants, do what feels good, and if it feels good, if a little is good, more is more, better, more is better, right? But how did that stigma? Did you ever have that stigma? Did you ever have that mindset of the stereotype that society puts upon us Latinos?
I think I lived it out. it out.
So you did have it. You did have it. Okay. All right. Good. So I want to know how did you live it out? Okay. Was it a gradual escalation of good grades, achievements? What was it? How did you do it?
How did I reach the pinnacle?
How did you take off the stereotype to say, you know, by golly, I belong here. Okay, the hood mentality is no longer mine. I ditched this.
And that was during playing soccer. Um, I was D6. I was all conference MVP, first team all conference. And my coach started to connect me with other colleges, 4 years with an opportunity to transfer. One of my friends he was a sophomore and he was headed to San Jose State. Some of the guys on the team have really good grades. And although I had the 7th grade reading level, I managed to push myself, right? With the support of my family in a sense of, I think they realized, okay, he means business now. He wants to make those changes now. And it was just, mind you, back then we didn't have the internet, right? So it was just a process of videotapes and watching individuals play at another level, hearing about individuals play at another level. I mean, locally, we had San Jose State, we had Dominican University, we had Cal State East Bay, which was at that time Cal State Hayward. And so, and Fresno State I knew of because my parents were here sometime. And so, I mean, I just had these schools to think about. And again, the options were you're going to be a roofer, right? Or you're going to have this other blue collar job. And I didn't like the respect I was giving when I was dirty all the time.
Yeah.
And so when I started to see individuals who made it past that time, mind you, individuals in like group, friends, neighbors, etc. At the time, we would call that where individuals went platinum. Like, oh, ya te hiciste más grande. Ahora sí vas a la escuela.
You can't completely turn your back on the hood because you still live in the hood. You still have to coexist with the homies that have that homie mentality, right? But you gotta start turning inside that gradual shedding of that stereotype. In my case, I never bought into that because for you it was soccer. For me, it was intellect. It's like I was the brightest of the class. I was always the valedictorian of my class. But in my junior year, I got recruited into a religious cult, and that was my downfall. Okay, so just like you, it's like I've done roofing. Okay, I have taken off roofs. I have put on roofs. The only kind of roof that I would never do is the tarp because I saw too many injuries and too many risk involved in that kind of work. But again, it's like our decisions that we make at an early age follow us for the rest of our lives. And this is something that the youth don't understand, that you got to have a foundation. You got to prepare for the future. You got to have a vision. You got to have a dream that is big enough for you to grow into it, as opposed to just having, just wasting your life away.
Yeah. So, that was the sprout of, maybe there's another level to this. But just like
did you begin to hang around other students that were taking their education seriously, to where through the process of osmosis that began to have a positive influence on you?
Right. So I remember one of our players, the sophomore I was speaking of, Arturo, he was getting ready to head out to San Jose State. And, in my mind, I was training because I'm going to Division I. I'm going to make it to the pinnacle of soccer and whatever team that was. And specifically at the time, I was eyeing Fresno State. It was Division I. I heard it had, one of the top attendance records in the nation. And so, hanging around Arturo, he was a brainiac. He had really high grades. I don't believe I was able to reach, that academic level. However, hanging around with him, he would push me academically, and I would push him from, the soccer standpoint, the athleticism, right? Let's show up early, let's train. And he would do the same, like, hey, you got to get your homework done. You know, Specifically at the time, my girlfriend, who's my wife, she was a brainiac herself. And so, she would guide me through some of these projects and, really support me from an academic level.
Okay. All right. So the transition began to happen. How far did you take your soccer career? Did you reach the pinnacle of getting into a pro team, or how far did you take it?
No, my sophomore year had a great season. At most, I played in the San Francisco League with a local team. But I realized it's tough. You start to get old. I was a late bloomer, so I entered college, 2 years after graduating high school. And so, you're old. And,
Yes.
The opportunities are moving past you for younger players, etc. And especially specifically those who had better grades. I think I managed to get a 3.7, if that,
Okay.
between 3.5 and 3.7. And so, no. So, just like the memes that are out in social media, I would have gone pro if I didn't get married. I would have gone pro if
Blame it on the marriage, right? As opposed to being honest and saying, I just didn't get it. I wasn't good enough.
So, there were several semi-pro teams locally from Oakland at the time.
Did you get married while you were going to college, or did you put off marriage till after college?
1 year after attending community college, I got
Okay.
married.
All right. Now, so you you didn't aspire to get on a path, academic path. You were kind of drawn into it through sports.
Right.
What kept you going to say, well, this is my path. I'm just going to keep going and continuing your education?
Mind you, I was still working as a roofer while going through school. So the carrot was, get out of this, stop doing this, and I always had plan A and plan B, right? Plan B was, if you didn't continue through school, this is what you're going to be doing. So it was at the forefront all the time. So that was the encouragement to continue the educational process.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to have to take a break, friends. After this message, we'll be right back. You're listening to Latinos Who Thrive with special guest Salvador Bueno. We'll be right back. Are you ready to unlock your full potential and embark on a journey of limitless knowledge and boundless creativity? Look no further than Wizard Academy, where dreams become reality. At Wizard Academy, they are not just a school, they're a community of visionaries, dreamers, and achievers. Whether you're a student, a working professional, or someone looking to reinvent yourself, Wizard Academy has a place for you. I know because I'm a graduate of the World Changers class of 2007 when I worked in print media. Imagine being guided by industry experts where innovation knows no bounds and where your passions are transformed into skills. Their cutting-edge programs span technology, business, arts, and more. You'll discover the magic within you and you wield it with confidence. At Wizard Academy, they embrace diversity and creativity, and they celebrate your unique journey. So be sure to join them in the heart of innovation where the extraordinary becomes ordinary. Visit them at www.wizardacademy.org now to explore their lineup of courses, faculty, and the incredible success stories of this community. Your future is waiting. Unleash your inner wizard today. We now return you to Latinos Who Thrive with special guest Salvador Bueno. And we're back. So, Dr. Bueno, you kept going down the path of education. At what point did it become easy for you? And at what point did you say, I can do this? It's like, this is who I now am.
I would love to say that that's what I said, but it wasn't. As an adult learner, now you manage a family, now you're managing kids. And for me, unfortunately, I felt like it became harder, right? I had more options of...
That was brought out in the movie. Yeah, that was brought out in the documentary of a couple of guys that had two small children that they have to take them to training because they had no babysitter. They couldn't afford a babysitter, so you had small children waiting on the sidelines in strollers while they were having to practice, for football. So you had some struggles and obstacles that you had to overcome. What were some other challenges that stood in the way for you that at some point you may even question yourself and wonder, what was I thinking of when I thought about earning a PhD?
Financial aid, the financings being supportive, and I don't know if it's in our culture, and I'll just speak on behalf of my household. When you make decisions to step outside of your home, outside of the family to do things, it's like you're on your own. So
you are.
That decision.
Yeah, it's like you made your bed. You made your bed and you sleep in it. It's like, we're not going to help you. Now, that's a sad commentary, but it's the truth. That family is not going to pull together to support you to get a higher education compared to Asians and to Middle Eastern families that I've also spoken to those groups here in Houston. It's like, if you are Asian, you are expected to be a physician, an engineer, or some other postgraduate level career that you're going to go in. And if you got poor grades as a little kid, it's like you're in trouble. They're just going to pounce on you, and they're going to force you to work your butt off to get those grades up, so that again, going to college and going to a university is mandatory. This is not an elective. The total opposite of Latino families. Es like, ay, mijito, no te vayas tan lejos. ¿Para qué vas para allá? Quédate aquí. Te necesito aquí, cerquitas de mí.
And, so that was the option. Because of my, and the data proved, right? The data proved for me, like, no va a ir a la escuela, 0.0, he's lacking behind.
Yeah,
he can't read,
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it seemed like I had a better chance working with my friends. And, historically from our family, my father's father was a roofer. My father was a roofer. The option was go to the military. And I'm not saying that's not a bad option, but these are projections that were set for me, if you will, right?
Expectations.
So, right. And so, what other option did I have? So this is in contrary to what was around me, right? This was in contrary to what was around me.
Yes. Now, why did you choose your major, to major in education? What made you select that choice?
So honestly, I was on campus at a local university, which I put the roof on the university, one of the dining halls here in Fresno. And that was my introduction to a university campus. And I would see students walking around while I was roofing. Mind you, at the time, I may have had an associate's degree plus, 60 units, in addition. And I'm thinking to myself, what if...
Let's be honest. Associate's degrees are as common as fleas on a dog's back. It's like, you can't do much with them. I mean, it's better than just having a high school education, but it's like the real money, the real opportunity lies in a graduate and postgraduate degree. And that's what younger listeners, if you're listening to us, is like, take it from two seasoned old dogs that this is the way the game is played. Okay. You cannot make up the rules of life. This is the rules by which you must play the game. Unless the exception is, unless you're Steve Jobs and you're going to come out with some world-changing innovation that that the world is going to be your oyster. Chances are you're not one of those. So listen to our advice. So talk about that, Dr.
And so I had an associate's degree, graphic design and computers, and all these wonderful.
Coding is a good thing, okay? Coding is a very good thing. But all the other ones, that's like basket weaving.
And so I moved to the Central Valley, right? I come from the Bay Area to the Central Valley, and it was unheard of at the time. So I had to fall back on roofing. And so I was roofing and seeing this college, which I eventually
Now, I want to go back. Because I don't want to miss this opportunity. What were you thinking when you're on top of that roof in blistering hot temperatures, I'm sure, or cold, because California gets pretty cold? What were you thinking as you're up there working with your body, bending over, and you're seeing all these young kids going to class? What were you thinking? What did you feel?
Initially, where did I go wrong? What about the wrong?
There's nothing wrong with this picture.
What's going on? And the roof we were putting on was metal. It was hot. It was 110 degrees, and
wow.
And that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, okay, what's the next step? Like, if I don't enroll into another school or do something else, this is it.
I can just imagine the reflection. Okay? It's like your face is being microwaved from the reflection of the metal roof onto your face.
Right. So, that's the initial thought.
So you had an epiphany, and you decided right there and then that things were going to have to change. And then what happened?
It's a reoccurring epiphany, if you've noticed in the stories that I've mentioned, right? It's just that, unfortunately, it was an idea, but again, how, right? How am I going to pay for this? How am I going to do this?
That's true.
I have a home.
That's true.
I have a home to manage. I have a mortgage.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do? And so, those were the options to figure out alternative routes. The reality was I couldn't go back to traditional college. I had to work, and so I was.
Did your wife support your continued education, or did she give you any kind of resistance because of finances?
No, my wife and I actually went through our bachelor's and on up to our master's together.
Okay.
And so, she was part of my study group, my cohort. So super supportive,
that helped.
Supportive in getting that education. And again, at times, it got rough. It got rough during those times. And it's like, did we make the right decision? Because all this was funded from ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. And I think you're still married to this lady.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
You survived. You survived the struggles. That's a testament to your grit. Talk to us
of myself, right? I don't want to get ahead of myself, but when I was sitting back and thought this PhD was for the birds, that's one thing I thought about. Like, how can I bring my family all this way, all this suffering, not to complete?
Okay. So you graduate. What was graduation like for you? What was it like? What did you feel?
Oh, it was beautiful. The first degree. I've got pictures as well with my kids in our arms. My wife and I standing side by side. And it felt like collectively we've done it. The orgullo of my family. I almost felt like even my father kind of gave me his blessings at that time. Like, okay, you can do this now. No eres ese muchacho vago.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
You made your family proud.
we made our family proud, both sides, my wife's side and my side.
Dr. Bueno, again, according to statistics, of all Latinos in America, only 10% earn a PhD. You had the opportunity to stay in academia or go into the private sector. You decided to form your own company. It's called Collabucate LLC. What does your company do? Talk to us what that was like and what led you to go down that path.
So my first job with teaching, I was brought in by another colleague who's an amazing human, and we were able to design a specific class for transfer scholars. Within this class, we were going to talk about leadership, and it was at a Christian university, and so we had to mesh some of the components from her end of the biblical seminary standpoint, and from my end from a business standpoint. And so at the time, that's where I thought, wow, curriculum and how do we bring in theory into practice and what's missing in these spaces? Because mind you, I've always been employed of some sort. So I understood what was missing within our educational environment,
What was missing? Go ahead and tell us that. What did you find was missing?
What I find and still find that's missing is there is a gap from theory to practice. And several of my colleagues and partners in this area, we have these discussions on, like, oftentimes some things that I learned from a book don't really apply to a specific situation. And so what is missing is that we take some of these scenarios from individuals like ourselves during those conversations, what we experience, what's in the workplace, and then how do we nourish, some of these theoretical components. And so, this allowed me to start, from a consultative approach, right? What do I believe?
You and I get it because we're theorists, okay? But for our listeners, they may not understand exactly what you just said. So break it down to us and give us an example or two that maybe I can elaborate on. Go ahead. You have the floor.
Sure. So, when we talk about, let's just say management functions, right? Any of the management functions, planning, organizing, let's just say some of those things, right? In the workplace, although there are plans that are required in organizational structures, etc., from a theoretical standpoint, the books are telling us that this is how things need to happen, right?
Right.
Well, at the workplace, how do we prioritize our priorities? Like, what do you do when, a roof has a leak or, you're not being paid, right?
Right.
You can't take those theory components into a planning process, right? And unfortunately, in some roofing environment, it's been like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Sure. So let me comment about that. Because I have a couple of certifications in project management. Mm-hmm. So here we're talking about as you get into especially the big projects, the big construction projects, you're going to have to quickly in your mind, if it's not explicitly given to you, which style of project management the project is going to be managed under, whether it's waterfall or whether it's the other one. For the life of me, I can't think of the other name. That's going to determine how you're going to execute the management of the project. And so here we get into the human component and some of the challenges that are not explained to you in the books and in the classroom. What do you do when you have a vendor that is refusing to keep working on a project because payment to them has been delayed, and maybe they're at the point that if they don't get a check right there that day, they're walking off and they're never coming back, and it's going to be more expensive to bring in another subcontractor to start from scratch to pick up the job. So here we get into the complexity of managing humans. It's a very complex, nuanced way of doing business, and you take a recent graduate, whether it's out of high school, college, or university, they won't know that they're going to be clueless as far as what is the first thing to do.
Right. And in these spaces, it's always easier to manage someone else's money.
Yeah,
Versus generating your own business and generating your own clientele, and those steps aren't necessarily transferable from a theoretical component.
that's right. That's right. So that's where the rubber meets the pavement. It's like, if it's your money on the line, it's like, I don't have time to waste. It's like, we gotta make a decision. We gotta pull the trigger, and we gotta do it right now. And that's leadership, okay? Because a lot of what you learned on the soccer field can be directly transferable onto the job site.
Right. We all experienced that during the pandemic, right?
Yes.
There was no books, right? And from a higher educational standpoint, we were on track to increase enrollments, right? And unfortunately, this is where we've seen, those enrollments decline. This is where we've seen tables turn. The astute, the academically sound, the degrees. Unfortunately, in some cases, we didn't have jobs, and no students, no work, right? And so this is where we've seen some of the blue collar, essential workers continue to move forward.
Absolutely.
And this is where we've seen, this is where I embedded those skill sets that I used to do, work with Hans, and I adapted. And so how do we teach that, right? How do we teach that to our students?
So you had Agile, which is the other style of project management. Right. You had Agile training and your brain was wired through Agile training as a soccer player, because that's what you got out in the field. It's like, you're playing out of muscle memory and out of short intellect as far as strategy, as far as what to do with the ball and how to read the other players. So you had a tremendous advantage in what you were doing, taking your life experience and your education and being able to bridge that divide.
Right.
Your company, Collabucate, tell us what else it does in the private sector or in academia. It's like, what are you doing?
So the objective, right, is stemmed from, my experience of collaboration, right? So when you asked previously, what happened? I think it took the community. It took a lot of collaboration from, individuals around me, people that I met, networking to build patient excellence. But to go back to the organization structure is, there's a lot of collaboration that does not take place in the workplace. So what I've seen just from personal experience in academia, unfortunately, some of us, including myself, tend to hoard. We tend to wrap our arms around specific projects. This is my research and this is my information. And collaborate is to break all of that, right?
Siloed thinking and siloed mindset to where there is no collaboration because it's a very competitive field. Academia is, because I worked in it. And a lot of backstabbing, let's be honest, lots of backstabbing. So this is not to dissuade anyone that wants to go into academia, but once you know how to play the game, it's like you can rise and you can even thrive because again, you know what the unspoken rules are.
Right. And so, the objective is, how do we partner with, organizations? How do we partner with education? How do we partner with our community? Because I think those are, for me personally, those are three key aspects of individuals as being successful, right? Because of my personal experience. And so our objective is just to support organizations, right? Whether it be from a professional development standpoint, when we talk about action research, how do we go in and observe some of these problems? How do we provide some recommendation? Whether it be enrollment increase, or retention, right? Or graduation rates. From a project management standpoint, you've seen that. Where are those bottlenecks? How
Yeah.
can we work together, collaboratively to provide some form of solution, right? When we talk about culture, culture in the workplace, culture on campus, right? Culture specifically, how do we all communicate with each other? How do we learn about each other? We don't necessarily all need to agree. I wish we could agree, right? Let's agree to disagree, but most importantly, how do
We can't even agree at home. much, much less, much less in the workplace with a bunch of strangers. So tell us, do you model different corporate scenarios as far as doing needs assessment to bring in your expertise, to bring in the specialized area where they may be missing some of the either the knowledge or the skills?
So I had the opportunity to work with a local huge healthcare facility. They have multiple locations, and I had the opportunity to design and develop professional development courses from frontline to C-suite, and so specifically catering to our Central Valley, right? Individuals in the Central Valley, and so the development of observation, right? Specifically listening to the client and what exactly they need, right? Tapping into HR to identify where are some of the bottlenecks that they are having, right? And so developing from there, right? Is it a customer service issue, right? Is it just awareness of strategy? Might be there's different individuals that go through different programs that don't necessarily have the entrepreneur spirit or the business background. That's right. Yeah, those small tweaks, right? And so those are things that we implement within the organizations when we're having conversations, right? We could bring in some research studies. In my case, Mayo Clinic was a great one to use, right? But again, maybe these environments aren't heavily focused on research. And how does Dr. Bueno take the research and provide some form of practical application?
Yeah, that very well said. Taking the theoretical conclusions that have already been established, you have the science to prove your strategy that you're going to develop, and then how do you break it down into the how it's going to be implemented at the environment.
Right. And here's a quick example was individuals questioning me about, running some surveys and collecting data. And I said, that's fantastic. If we're willing to invest the money in there, great. How about we just log in and review some dissertations and identify where the gaps are, right? There's individuals who are writing about the gaps and what they would focus on. But if we want to take $5,000 to $10,000 and invest in some of those surveys and data collection, and if you have 6 months to do that, then fantastic. What I would do, right? This is the street smart. This is the roofing smart. This is on the field of adaptation. Well, I know from an educational standpoint that I could go back and read some of these studies, and they're providing the gaps that we need to already address.
Sure. It is so bureaucratic when you get into that level of communication and strategy building that it reminds me of Iacocca's, the former CEO of Ford Motor Company, when he said that when he was running Ford, that if someone at GM saw a snake, they would form a committee to study snakes to know what to do with them, as opposed to just being decisive and kill the damn snake.
And unfortunately, that has been some of my experience within higher education. Oftentimes I'm told to, slow down, calm down, we'll get there, but when there is data that shows that whether it's 1%, 10%, 6% of us attaining those degrees, right? So when we think about Latino males, what percentage of that are PhDs? What percentage of those? Shout out to my Latinos, my sisters, man, they are striving, right? But what about us in a sense of people like me, youngsters, the degenerates that aren't going to make it? How do we support them?
Let me ask you this, Victor to Sal.
You have your PhD. Now, in working and using your PhD, is that your training to become a Zen master, to have the patience to say, shut up? It's like, I have the PhD, I have the education, sit down. This is the way it should be done. Address that. Because I'm at the point, as I mentioned to you before we went on the air, it's like, I don't have the patience. It's like, I know what needs to be done. And if you don't agree, then we can agree to disagree, and God bless you. I'm out of here.
That's a great point. I wrestle with both sides, right? I'll wrestle with, how do we reach a space where we can implement policy, right? And what does it take to get there? And then the other half is, and I'm doing pretty good on my own. I'm doing
exactly
on
exactly. I don't need this.
I'm doing, and so in the spirit of collaboration, I think it's beautiful that we could get together and move forward, leaning a little on imposterism at times. It's like, oh, I think I need to go read another study about something, right?
Yeah.
But going back to the theory and practice and going back to when we first started this conversation about having the ganas, I think at sometimes, it's action.
Some people never get over the imposter syndrome. Where do you fall on the spectrum of feeling like an imposter in certain circles?
I had a recent leader, we'll just say a leader of the campus, if you will, made a comment that I had a very strong personality.
Okay. Congratulations. Okay. We need more people like you.
And so that was the pinnacle of an imposter. I'm standing for what I believe in.
Yes.
The research is supporting. I'm living the research out. I've surpassed, what data said I should be. And therefore, yes, I don't have a strong personality. I am passionate about pushing the cause forward.
Yes. I want to share something with you that I read yesterday that I had to go look it up to find out what did it really mean. It's a poem or a saying that was written by a Syrian poet that says, tragedy is the situation where a mature mind lives in the same body as a romantic heart. So again, that's the perpetual dichotomy, right? So what he was really talking about, and after I understood what he was saying, I totally concurred. Having a romantic heart is that passion that you put your heart into it. It's like you love what you do. You're doing it con ganas. You're doing it by heart. It's like, and you got the mature mind to find that inner balance to where, just like you said, I couldn't have said it better. It's like you were standing your own power, your own personal power, your own maturity, your own expertise, and you held your ground. And some people are not going to like it, and that's okay. You're not out to please everybody else. You're out to make a difference. And that's the kind of leadership that we need in this country for Latinos to come into their own sense of power, to be able to lead.
Right. And so, when we talk about higher education, as I sent over some information regarding my dissertation, factors contributing to Latino males' successful experience in higher education leadership, right? It was a qualitative narrative study. I had individuals share their stories, right? So I'm living out this story of, in the beginning of this interview, we talked about, the requirements, right? Checking those boxes. And for a long time, I identified why I couldn't, raise the corporate ladder or the educational ladder, if you will. I thought maybe it was because of that passion. Maybe it was because of those things. It was like, nope, you didn't have the PhD. And so from there, I strongly believe that if we are not getting these degrees, right, if we are not in the boardroom, because data shows it, that if we are not in the boardrooms and we are not encouraging these individuals who look like yourself and myself, right, then how how can we increase these numbers, right? How can we increase these numbers of leaders, whether it be in the boardrooms or in the workplace or, on committees?
Give us your forecast, because you obviously study lots of data and where Latinos are going in America. Give us your forecast. Take out your crystal ball and give us a preview of the future.
So unfortunately, during this study, it was back in 2002, there was a research study that says Latinos in higher education, many enroll too far, too few graduate, right? I hosted a conversation on campus towards the end of the semester, and I went back to look at some of this data. And unfortunately, for again, Latino males, the needle has barely moved.
Wow. Wow.
And so the forecast, if you look at, post-pandemic, we are on easily a 60% decline. I mean, there's research study you can find out there, right? Pew and Excelencia, those numbers are there. We're still on a decline. So my forecast is that if we do not intentional, right? I stood up at one of my committee meetings on campus, and I said, if we don't intentionally go after the 40% decrease that we are talking about right now, that's not going to turn over. So the forecast is, for myself, Dr. Bueno, how do we start at K through 12? How do we start in the community colleges? And how do we specifically communicate to our community? And I say this with, how do I go back to my father and say, God, we got to go to college. We got to get these degrees. We got to get this education. So unfortunately, I say that we will be on the rise. But in my heart of heart, if we don't have enough individuals that are going after, not saying that any of these colleges and universities that I've been associated do not go after it, but we need to intentionally build pathways and build programs, or else we will not, because that's what data is showing. I'm not saying that. Data is showing, right?
Yeah, no, it's going to take a big thrust to reach the tipping point to where we can count on the future of Latinos entering in droves into the educational field. Dr. Bueno, it's been very insightful to have you with us today. We got to have you back to keep us abreast of your journey. Any final words for our listeners? What would you say to that young Latino or Latina that's listening to you today? Because we're heard in 9 countries and we have over 10,000 downloads per episode. So you have a very big audience. What would you say to them?
Absolutely. Step 1, I would say find a mentor. Find somebody that you can connect with. You can reach out to me. I can provide some guidance, but definitely find a mentor, right? Find a mentor that can help you get through some of these barriers. Number 2 is, identify a roadmap. Where do you want to go to? Is education something you want to do, right? And then lastly, you definitely want to identify, and what I share with all my students, what is this educational knowledge or theory or practice that you're learning? How does it resonate, right? How does it resonate with you? How do you take these practices until you filter those within your personal perspective? Because that is what I've identified in the practical environment. How the theory, something I learned, resonates with my personal being, my personal spirit, and then how do I impact that specific environment? So find a mentor, identify a roadmap, where you headed, and then ultimately filter any of this content through your personal spirit. Where does this go to? How can I make it involved?
Thank you so much for that sage advice. We're going to have to leave it there, friends. Until next time, go out and thrive, my friends.